Okay. Is everyone able to see the PowerPoint slides? Thumbs up or head nod? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. So, welcome to this workshop. I'm going to explain how you can create a welcoming environment for sign language users and individuals with hearing loss. As you see on this slide, when your team talks about access to services, what do you all usually mean by access to services? Does anyone have anything to add to what your access to services means? Okay. Really, what access to services means is people think about usually an automatic thought. Well, we want a ramp to make sure that they can get into the building. We want to have a handicap door that will automatically open when they press the button. Those are usually the type of access that individuals think of when they're talking about making sure that there's access to services. However, for deaf and hard of hearing people, the access to services isn't physical necessarily, but it's more about language. So we'll go into more detail about that. These are some communication access symbols that are commonly used. There's 5 on this screen. If you set up any of these symbols on your signage at your front desk or at the front door, anytime a deaf or hard of hearing individual comes in, they will immediately know, okay, this person is knowledgeable about working with deaf or hard of hearing individuals. They see that you are able to accommodate their needs. The first slide at the top left, what do you think that means? The one with the ear and the lines.
That is going to be a mobile loop service, correct?
No, not a loop, not the first one. It just is for any assistive technology or listening device. The one in the middle, that's the more popular or common symbol that you'll see around. That means that you are providing interpreting services. For example, if you have a deaf or hard of hearing person who uses sign language, when they come into your building for services, they're more apprehensive. And the reason they have that is because they have always had to fight to say, hey, I'm deaf, I need an interpreter, I need someone who can sign with me. And the person on the other side is usually saying, well, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know anything about that. And so then that individual who's seeking services is going through a secondary trauma saying, oh, again, I'm having to deal with this. I'm having to, educate others on how to communicate with me when this should have already been done. And so we can explain about using independent contractors, interpreters that you can set up to serve your clients when those individuals come in. So that when they see that you offer this service on your signage, then they come in with that assuredness that you have the knowledge to provide them access. The third icon that's on the top right, CC, of course, that's for closed captioning. You usually see that on televisions. You can either turn it off or on. It's a service you opt into. So when a deaf person comes into a room, they may look at the television screen and say, no, there's no words on the screen for me to be able to read. So they may come to the front desk and say, please CC, which is closed captioning, turn on. So that would then be that you would just use the remote control to turn the captioning on the TV in whatever waiting room or area where you are. If you don't know how to turn on your captioning, please just contact me. I can show you and walk you through how to set up captioning on devices. The fourth icon at the bottom left shows a video interpreter. This is more of a new symbol. It's not exactly as widespread as a previous one. I have someone in the waiting room. Let me go ahead and admit them into the workshop. So the video interpreter, that usually it came about during COVID. That was, we had the request for video remote interpreters, not in-person interpreters, because of, the trying to stop the spread of the disease. So anytime you were having meetings or intakes or what have you, you would have a video interpreter. And it was easier, at the time to utilize that. But it's important that you ask the person who is receiving the services, the deaf or hard of hearing person, if they would like to receive video remote interpreting, because about half of the population would rather not use VRI for their communication. The fifth and final symbol on the slide is the blue with an ear. That just shows that there's a hearing loss. That's for those individuals with hearing loss who typically would never ask for other types of assistive technology devices, because most of them, they know, are not provided at places that they go. So this is something that we recommend that you provide services so that these individuals, when they walk in and they see, oh, okay, I know I'm deaf or hard of hearing and I can't, what if they call my name? I can't hear them calling my name. They see the symbol and they know that you all know how to handle situations for people who are unable to hear. So these are symbols that are ways to ease communication access. Any questions about these symbols or before we move on? Okay. Before I do go to the next slide, I do have a question for you all. Imagine yourself as a person who's deaf or hard of hearing going into a building for services. When you walk into the waiting room, what do you expect the waiting room to have for you to have access? What do you think the waiting room should have for you to have access? I'll go ahead and start with something. Of course, closed captioning. What else? Okay, we'll go on. So make sure that the closed captioning is on. Make sure that the room has a visual fire alarm, a fire alerting system, a strobe light. Make sure that you have pictures and resources available for people to see that they're included, that they're inclusive of people who are deaf and hard of hearing, just like the general population. People magazine, whatever variety of magazines you put in the waiting room, you see, okay, well, those are all hearing focused, but if there's a deaf person that comes in or a person with hearing loss, they may not feel any sort of connection with that type of material. So it would be nice if you had any sort of a deaf or hard of hearing publication. For example, there's two right here on the screen. One is Deaf Life. You can look for that online and pick out a subscription and get that actually sent to your office on a monthly basis. There's a way that you should make sure that when you are calling the patient back for their appointment, that they are not missing their name being called, or that you are providing another way to call them, whether or not you're giving them a sign with a name on it, or you're making sure to let them know that you're going to come and get them in person, because this person who walks in and doesn't know how they're going to be called back for their appointment is going to be sitting there with some angst of, how am I going to get called? What if I hear? What if I don't hear? What if I miss being called back? And am I going to feel safe sitting here? And is there a place where I can sit and see everything? So be aware of those things. Any questions regarding the waiting room setup? Okay. Effective communication before the interpreter arrives, or if there is not going to be an interpreter. Use your resources such as paper and pen, paper and pencil, or if you have a whiteboard, use a whiteboard. Make sure that any sort of written communication is kept simple. Just keep it to the point. Try to make sure that it's easy to read by using contrasting paper and ink color. For example, at the front desk, oftentimes you'll write, hello, thank you for coming. When is your appointment? Blah, blah, blah. Don't have to go through all the niceties that you would think. You could certainly say, hello, what time is your appointment? What is your name? Interpreter will arrive soon. Kind of just the basics instead of dragging it out and making it more complicated to read. Or if you happen to know some basic signs, go ahead and use them. Feel free to sign hello or welcome. Deaf and hard of hearing people love that. They're like, okay, at least someone's making an effort to learn some of my language and to make a connection with me. Most of the deaf and hard of hearing individuals will have the patience to know that you are learning and will probably even try to teach you more signs as you go along. A smile and a friendly face goes a long way. Please make sure that you maintain eye contact with the individual. Just take your time and be patient. If you try to rush through the system, the patient is definitely going to be taking that on and think that you're not being polite, that you're being rude. If you're not making eye contact, again, it's not going to feel like there's a connection being made. Part of our deaf culture is eye contact. That's how we know that you are attuned to me and that you are paying attention to what I have to say. It's a very simple thing, just to maintain eye contact. If you're working with individuals who have a hearing loss and use lip reading or speech reading as their communication, this is different. There are 2 points that we want to make sure we emphasize. Don't cover your mouth if at all possible. If you have to wear a mask, please try to wear a clear mask. There are 2 examples shown on the screen here. Use those so that your lips are still visible. On the right side of the slide, you can see these 4 images where you can see how we have distorted what is being said to mimic having a distortion of the lips or having your lips covered. You may only be able to see 2 or 3 full complete words. The rest of it you can't see. If somebody turns to the side and you're still talking to the person that's in front of you, they can't lip read you when they're only seeing half of your mouth move. So you need to face them. If you're only speaking with flat affect and you're not moving your mouth a whole lot, then they may not be able to see that because they're not seeing the movements being made. And then if there are multiple people speaking at the same time, they may be using their residual hearing to listen as well, and then they can't distinguish what is being said versus what is being said off of somebody's lips. So always try to maintain that eye contact, keep face-to-face communication, and check in for communication. Make sure, are you understanding? Did you get what I said? That sort of thing. It doesn't always have to be about sign language. Of course, you know that means that there's a problem. But with using lip reading or speech reading, you also still do need to check in and make sure the comprehension is happening. All right. I think we're good so far, everyone. All right. So at the front desk, there are options for amplification for people who come in and need it. You can see the first picture that I have here is for a person who has a hearing loss and requests a specific listening device. If you don't have hearing devices, go ahead and purchase some. Once you purchase the device, you have the receipt. You can contact me with that documentation. Use your 124E form, and we can reimburse you for that expenditure. So amplification devices just amplify the sound, make the sound louder so that the person can hear it. Also, the audio amplifiers, they have the loudspeaker and the headphones, plus the RF power amplifiers that can then send the message to the transmitter. So you have amplification devices available at the front desk so that they can hear what you are saying. So you should have it for the input power of the signal so that they can hear it louder. Then you have the 2.1 voltage amplifier, which increases the input, making it louder for the person to hear it. And then the 2.2 current amplifier increases that current. The 2.3 power amplifier increases the input power further. So it just all works together in order to make it louder for the person who's using the device. If you have any questions about these amplifiers, please do feel free to reach out to us. Some individuals already have knowledge of this, some individuals do not. And if you have any questions, please just ask. Don't just, buy it and leave it in the box forever and never use it. These are useful tools. Next, I'm going to show you a couple of images of faces. And I want you all to let me know if you think that this would be effective for speech reading or lip reading or not. So the first image is the upper left with the gray mustache and the little almost goatee. Do you think that would be easy to lip read? Yes or no? No, not easy to read. Why don't you think it's easy to read?
Probably distorts the movement of the lips.
Yes. And also in the chat, it says mouth is covered. And yes, you cannot see the movement of the lips with the hair hanging down in front. That's not easy to lip read at all. The second picture, the middle top with the red beard and the mustache, do you think that would be easy to lip read?
Maybe not as bad as the first one, but you know.
Okay. The beard with the mustache at the top, it's still kind of impossible because the whole time that you're watching the mouth move, the little curly cues on the edge of the mustache are going to be moving, and that is extremely distracting. I mean, you're focused specifically on the lips, and then you have this visual distraction right off to the sides. It's going to make it very difficult to be able to read. Mm-hmm. The third one on the top row, the female with curly brown hair and kind of a blue or maybe black dark lipstick. Do you think that that would be easy to read?
Absolutely. You got the colored lips, and it begs for attention. You know what I mean?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. Let's look at the fourth picture with the red lipsticks at the the red lipstick at the bottom left. Do you think that would be easy to read with the red? I see some of the head nods going. Okay. So the answer really is no. Neither of these are going to be easy to lip read. Again, the same concept is that if you are focused on the lips, the color can be more of a distraction and take away from the words that you're trying to read. Whereas, for signers, if you have an interpreter with very long, loud painted fingernails, or the fingernails that have, all the jewels on them, that can be extremely distracting when your eyes are trying to follow the hands. It's more distracting and makes us lose the point. So while it may seem like it could be, no, it's actually more of a distraction. And then the final picture, the bottom right with the long gray beard. Do you think this one would be easy to lip read? No. Same as with the previous two mustaches, yes. Any shape of beard, honestly, anything that is covering your mouth makes it impossible to lip read accurately. Mm-hmm. Any questions about lip reading? Okay. All right. If you have acquired an interpreter for the appointment, what do you do when that interpreter arrives? Make sure that you let the interpreter know like where a bathroom is, where the restroom is at the office, which hallway they're going to be going in, if there's a separate waiting room for the interpreter, because most of the interpreters will arrive possibly 10 to 15, 5 to 10 minutes early for the appointment just to be on site and check in with you. And the interpreter is going to look around the room and see if they see the deaf individual there or not. Sometimes they will go up and briefly introduce themselves to the deaf individual and say, I'm the interpreter for the appointment. But then there are other times when the interpreter knows that they should not do that, should not already go up and contact the deaf individual. They may go to the front desk and say, is there another room where I can wait before the meeting begins? Sometimes interpreters prefer not to have that interaction with the deaf consumer before the appointment, because sometimes interpreters have come from another assignment and they've, been in a hurry to get to your location for this next appointment, or maybe they do need to take, a bio break, take care of themselves just to get ready for the next appointment coming so they can provide the best service for your client and yourself. So just give them that moment if possible. Let the interpreter know of any any updates on the deaf and hard of hearing individual, or if there is a change in schedule. Let the interpreter know if there are any safety issues currently going on in the building that they need to be aware of. For example, we had an assignment that an interpreter went to a location, and when they arrived, everything seemed fine. They walked up into the building, no problem. But then they immediately let the interpreter, they let me as the deaf individual know what the situation was, but they didn't let the interpreter know. So as soon as the situation happened, I was able to get up and I left immediately, but the interpreter was still sitting there like, huh, what's going on? And so you need to make sure that they are also in on whatever a safety issue that may be going on. Let them know so that they know the route that they need to leave, how to access, stairs or an elevator, in order to be able to get out of the building safely if need be. It's just an informational type of update. Also, interpreters will sometimes have like a bag or a backpack with them, possibly a purse. They'll have their keys or their cups from their car, depending on the individual interpreter that you have. Some places allow these items, some places don't allow these items in. So again, you need to let the interpreter know, we don't allow these on our floor. Please put your items in this locker that we can lock for safekeeping so that they're not, taken or knocked over or misplaced, so that when the interpreter leaves, they can't find their belongings. So make sure to be able to offer those types of options, a safe place for storage of items for the interpreter if your building does not allow personal items in. Any questions about the interpreter and updating them? All right. It is our responsibility as the Community Mental Health Center to ensure that there is effective communication in any of our services. The top comic strip, you can see where they have brought in a deaf father and his hearing child, and the doctor is making comments to the father about the child through an interpreter. I will tell you, this has happened to me numerous times. I have 3 children. It has happened where my child has tried to fool me and say that, no, this is not what the doctor said. This is what, they said. They try to tell me that, no, this isn't, what I thought that I understood. But I'm the father. I'm the one who's responsible for the decision making, not my child. But like I said, this has happened to me before with my 3 children going to doctor's appointments, even though the doctor is speaking to my child, as they do with any child for an appointment, you include your child in it. But then they wouldn't let me know what they were saying to the child or what the responsibility of, me was going to be once, I left the room. I needed to be kept apprised of the communication that was going on. Providing an interpreter would help make sure that that was effective communication going on. But it's the same with the second slide here, or the second comic strip. When you don't provide an interpreter, hearing individuals typically assume that everyone can read lips and that that would be good enough. But of course it's not. Sometimes deaf individuals are kind of on the fence about that, like, oh, I don't want to have to reschedule my appointment. I don't want to have to come back. I don't want any more delays. This is already an issue. I know interpreters are hard to book, but, it's really impossible to call at the last minute, but I need to be seen. But never, 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 really, just do not go on without an interpreter, because what usually happens, the second slide of that strip, you can see where everything's all gobbledygooked. You can't understand what is being said. So the deaf or hard of hearing person who is lip reading really only reads 35% of the communication. That means that 65% of what you're saying is totally lost. Some important information is missed in that 65%. So what happens? They could be, hurting themselves. They could be taking their medication incorrectly. They could be injuring their child by doing something wrong. So you don't want that. You don't want it to come back on you as this is an issue, something terrible has happened. So make sure that you are providing the accurate communication that you need. When you make an appointment for your clients, the systems now have these reminders for appointments, which is great. And that's allowed. I mean, that's fine for deaf and hard of hearing. But if possible, texting would be best as a reminder. If you call the individual directly, usually you go through a video relay service, which is calling through a call center that has an interpreter that can leave a message for you in sign language for that person. But there's often miscommunications with that because the interpreter doesn't know what you're saying, doesn't really maybe understand the name of your company, or could just sign it incorrectly. So if you put it in text or even in an email, then it is clear the date, the time, and the location. Whereas sometimes with the interpreter, if you are speaking really fast because you're giving just this rote message to the person, this is so and so calling from such and such an office, you have a follow-up appointment on this is such date at such and such a time, the interpreter is not going to be able to keep up with that fast pace to get the information across to the deaf person in the message accurately. So it could get missed. Plus, if the deaf person is trying to write down a note about it, when they look down, they're going to miss what then is being signed. Also, if you're sending an email, try to keep it short and simple, same like with the text message. Just get to the point. You have an appointment this day, this time, this location. You don't need to go on and give a whole lot of extraneous information. Just keep it to the point, because oftentimes people will see that and will be overwhelmed with the amount of words on the screen and then just become overwhelmed, possibly just stop reading, and then may not actually come to the appointment. So make sure you let the deaf individual know that it is confirmed that there is an interpreter for the appointment. Just let them know you have this appointment, such time, such a date, and we do have an interpreter confirmed. For myself, I usually personally call maybe 3 to 4 weeks before my appointment to remind my office, have you already called for my interpreter? And they say, yes, we've already called. But sometimes they say, well, I don't know the name. Okay, well, could I have the referral number or whoever you called so that I can call and ask who that interpreter is from the agency? That would be on me as the deaf individual to follow up with the agency to find out which interpreter is coming. Because I may not, what if I call and there's a person that they're going to send and I'm like, yeah, this individual, I worked with them before and we've had an issue, or there's a conflict of interest. I have the right to tell the agency that I can't use that interpreter for this appointment. So before you make your appointments with your interpreters and such, you can always ask the deaf client ahead of time to say, do you have a preferred interpreter? Or do you have a couple of interpreters that you would like to have used for your appointments? That will also make it easier for your scheduling. The reason behind that is because in therapeutic sessions, you're developing a connection, a rapport. You need trust, you need that confidentiality and that comfortness of being able to share your history and talk about things. And if you aren't with an interpreter who you can feel that same rapport with, not just with the clinician, but with the interpreter, that can really hinder the process and cause issues. So you need to honor the list. If a deaf person tells you, please don't use this interpreter, or please try to use these interpreters. This is a very small community. The deaf community is extremely small. Everyone knows each other. Even the interpreters know each other. That's why deaf individuals know to provide a list, because there are some interpreters who are not involved in the deaf community or as active in different socials. And so there may be some more, distance between them and the deaf person. Whereas another interpreter may be highly involved and you just don't want that person staring at you when you're going through whatever you're going through. So again, just honor that person's request if they do have a preferred interpreter. The final point, this is also just a benefit that you can double check that, yes, you did get the interpreter, you've confirmed that you have the interpreter coming, and then the client knows that they can come and have access at their appointment. So as I said, video relay service, where you're calling through an interpreter. As you can see on this picture, this is a simplified version of it. Each individual deaf person has their own video phone through a variety of services. There's Purple, Convo, or Sorensen. Those are the three major companies that the FCC provides funding to. The Federal Communications Commission provides funding to provide free video phones to give to deaf individuals to make phone calls. So what it is I use this video phone, which is similar to a webcam, like what you're using right now for Zoom. I make a call, I call through to a call center and get a hearing interpreter, just like what you're hearing now. And that interpreter facilitates my phone call to the hearing person. It's just like if you're doing it in an office and you have the interpreter on site, you're just using that interpreter to go through to talk. As a deaf person, if I call another deaf person, of course, I do it directly. I'm not going through an interpreter when I'm talking to a deaf person. I just call their video phone directly. But the same service works with an interpreter in the middle as the mediary to then call you on the phone and talk to you. If there's a hearing person who's trying to call a deaf person, of course, then this is in the reverse order. The hearing person has a phone number, which is the video phone number for the deaf person. Again, it's provided through the FCC. These are not general numbers. They're not like made up numbers or something. It is a specific number, and it connects the hearing caller to a interpreter in a call center at one point, and then that person makes the call to the video phone of the deaf person. I see there's the message in chat from Brandon that you all have the Sorensen InTouch app on your iPad. Okay, great. That's at the Turning Point and available for all Broadway programs. Great. Yeah, there are a variety of those type of apps. You can use them on an iPad. You can use them on your mobile phones. You can actually have a computer version of it or a separate standalone video phone. Yes. Also, if the deaf individual comes in to your building needing services, it's possible, I'm not going to say all, you never can say all, most of them already know how to use video phones. A few of them may not have experienced video phones yet. If they don't have high-speed connection or something, they may not have the ability to use it. So this would be a good opportunity to take a moment to train them how to use it. If you're unsure how to use it yourself, you can contact me. I can pull up, a Zoom meeting, not to go into too great a detail, but I can pull it up and you can use a laptop or what have you to call me. We can do it over Zoom and I can go over and explain it to the person as well. So I've already kind of explained most of this about using video relay service. Most of us do use it on a daily basis. I will be sending this PowerPoint to Brandon after we're done, and you can read through this more if you need to, but this talks about more of the video relay service, VRS. Also, when you are using the relay service, I've put a couple of tips here for you of how to effectively have a telephone conversation with a deaf person. Speak directly to the person. For example, a lot of hearing people using an interpreter always say, tell him, tell her, ask her. Don't do that. Just talk directly to the deaf individual. The interpreter, takes care of changing that over. Don't worry about that. Just speak directly to the deaf individual. The deaf caller themselves has if they are making the call to you, has the decision to either announce that this is an interpreted call or not. Sometimes if you hear it announced, this is an interpreted call from Sorensen XYZ, a lot of people hang up on those thinking it's a spam call. So then deaf individuals have learned that they can ask for it not to be announced, and they proceed as if it's not an interpreted call. But again, you may notice there's, just some patience or it seems kind of awkward. It could be that, you hear a woman's voice, but they're saying it's a man's name. That happens quite often for me. There's often a female voice. And so I tell the interpreter, don't announce me. And of course, when the person is expecting my call from an Anthony, but they hear a female saying this is Anthony, they hang up. And I'm like, no, just hang with me for a little bit. I'm not trying to trick you. It's just this is how I'm having to communicate with you through an interpreter. So we've talked about how to communicate with deaf individuals on the telephone, but how do we do with hard of hearing individuals? Just speak at a natural pace, at a moderate speed. Don't try to change or modulate your voice. Have a regular tone. Make sure that your mouth is up to the receiver, to the mouthpiece, so that it can clearly be transmitted. Try to make sure you're not calling from a noisy area, because those can then get picked up on the phone and distort what you're saying. Or, if you're in a very busy office or something, maybe try to move to a different area, or have people try to hold their conversation for a moment if you can't. Go to a different room that's quiet. Working with hard of hearing and deaf individuals does require some pre-planning, because you're going to have to schedule for an interpreter or a captioner. So as soon as you've made that appointment with your deaf consumer, immediately go ahead and arrange to have your interpreter or captioner. Don't wait until the week before, 2 weeks before, or I know that there's sometimes budgetary concerns or constraints, but don't wait, because interpreters and captioners usually are booked 3 to 6 weeks in advance, and so they fill up. And I myself am responsible for interpreting requests and coordination. And there are times that I can't get someone even a couple of weeks out. I have to immediately, as soon as I know that there's going to be a need, go ahead and make that reservation for the interpreter or caption. Because sometimes at the last minute, I'm having to go through 4 or 5 different agencies to get an interpreter because I've waited until the last minute, or it was a last minute appointment that's come up. So do not wait to reserve your interpreter or captioner. When you are requesting services from an interpreter agency, hopefully you already have a list of approved interpreter agencies established for your center. Do you all already have that, Brandon? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great.
We send those out quarterly as a reminder, but they're always available.
Okay, great, perfect. Are you using Northern Kentucky Services for the Deaf? Is that the one? Yes, okay. Okay, perfect. So when you are ready to make the call and request an interpreter, these are the pieces of information that you need to give the agency, either on the phone or in your email, or if they have an online system, whichever way you request your interpreters. You need to let them know who you are, that you are making the request. That way they know who set it up. They can get more information from you. Make sure you give the date of the appointment and the time, the start and the end time. For example, if you have an appointment and it's 10 to 11, I highly recommend, add 15 minutes to that, at least before the start of the appointment. That way you have time to do pre-meeting and making sure that any information is shared before the meeting is starting. Before, if you just do, okay, we're at 10 o'clock and the interpreter shows up right at 10 o'clock, there may be a slight delay in getting everything set up, getting the person moved in, getting to the room, etc. So if you go ahead and do it 15 minutes ahead of time, that way you're assured that the interpreter is there, the deaf client is there, the interpreter has the information needed for the appointment and is ready to go, instead of, okay, what am I walking into at the last minute? Anything that they need to know, such as like vocabulary, maybe signs that have been used previously. For example, there's a sign for suicide, but there are actually numerous signs for suicide, just as there are different modalities of suicide. So that needs to be discussed. How are we going to sign this topic? Plus, maybe the deaf person themselves have a preferred way to sign that concept. And it's like, well, of all these signs, this is the one I prefer. I don't want you to use this other sign because it, triggers me or something. That is something that could be discussed in a pre-meeting with the client and the interpreter. Of course, any of the participants that are going to be in the meeting, the interpreter needs to know who is going to be in the clinician role, a social worker role, or a case manager in the meeting. Plus, then, of course, who is the deaf person. So make sure that you let them know, okay, this person is coming, they're facilitating the meeting, this person is coming, they're going to be a note taker or scribe, or this person is coming and they're actually the therapist, and then we're going to also have the psychiatrist there at the same time. So if you can give them names with spellings, that will help, because of course the interpreter is going to have to spell out the individual names, and if you are not familiar with that last name, or if there's a different spelling or pronunciation or something, that name may not come out right when the interpreter spells it because they've never seen or heard it before. So if you can give that ahead of time, that would be most beneficial. Of course, request which type of service you need, whether it's an interpreter or a captioner, a CART provider, computer-aided real-time captioner. Oftentimes, hard of hearing individuals want to use CART, but they get forgotten. Sometimes they may prefer an interpreter and CART because that matches their needs to be able to, follow along with what is being said. Please honor that request. Also, describe the appointment. Like, what kind of an appointment is this? Just a med check? Is it, a 6-month follow-up? Is it just a well check? Is this a follow-up from a crisis stabilization unit stay or something like that? Any of that information would be beneficial for the interpreter to understand the paradigm that they're getting ready to walk into, and maybe even come up with some of the ideas of what they may see. Because interpreters, oh, someone's coming in. If an interpreter doesn't know what they're about to walk into on the appointment, and then all of a sudden there's a heated discussion about rape or other sensitive topics, that interpreter may be caught off guard. And then sometimes interpreters can handle that, but other times they're like, yeah, this is just not something that I can do, and I would have, had I known, I would have called off on this and gotten you a different interpreter. Also, please make sure you let the agency know if it's going to be a local appointment, as in on site, or if it's going to be a virtual appointment. Make sure you're giving them the address, parking instructions if there are any, which door to use, any access information. Just don't just give them just a generic, building number and then no suite or floor or other information. If you want them in a specific place, tell them the specific place they need to go, third floor, or check in at the front desk or check in at the side desk or what have you. Make sure that all that information has been prepared or provided for the interpreter agency. I'm going to check the chat. Okay, question from Brandon. What is the best practice when encountering a deaf consumer in crisis or has expressed immediate thoughts of self-harm in regards to communication? Okay, that is a good question, Brandon. How to explain this? There are various situations, and it could be a variety of different approaches for that. Honestly, just let them know that, especially if they're trying to harm themselves, as soon as work on getting that communication there. This is very similar to the last slide. When you're asking for an interpreter, this is related to asking for a captioner. The same type of information should be given. Sometimes there's a difference, like if you're letting the person know, for example, for cart providers, they need preparatory materials, just as interpreters do. But sometimes interpreters can mitigate not having materials easier than captioners. But with captioners, sometimes they have to go ahead and input some information into their system. They need to know the names, the spellings and such, so that they can go ahead and get their computer ready for when they're typing in certain keystrokes, it actually prints out that person's name or the correct spelling of the name, like Anthony or something. Not only that, but they are also putting in any other information that they need. Like, okay, if the meeting is about addiction, then the captioner may have a vocabulary list of addiction terms that would be standard use, and then they can load that into their computer so that when you're talking and they're typing it out, it actually recognizes what you're saying. This is the last slide. Sorry, I seem to have taken a bit longer for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Let me ask, true or false? First question, lip reading is the easiest way for a deaf person to communicate with a hearing person. True or false? Correct, false. It is false. The second one, top right, paperwork to fill out or signature process can be done without an interpreter. True or false? Okay, this one I'll explain many times a person will not know detailed medical history or vocabulary. Same like with legal settings. Some of the vocabulary is not going to be innate. It's not just going to be something that easily comes to them. But they're afraid if they speak up and say, I don't understand this, or ask for clarification, they don't know if that's going to be trouble or if they're going to be able to get help or anything like that. Don't allow a deaf or hard of hearing person to fill out the paperwork until they have the communication access that they need, whether that be an interpreter or what have you. The next one, interpreters always provide the best access for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. Is that true or false? Interpreters always provide the best access for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. True. True. It is true. It's always the best access with interpreters. The final box, how well a deaf or hard of hearing person reads or writes English is a good indicator of their intelligence. True or false? This is false. This is false, yes. Most of the time, there will always be some puzzling things happening because you're not hearing the word said every day. You're not seeing the word used every day. You may know what a word means in one context, but then a few days or a week later, you see it used in a different context. And it's like, I don't know if that is what that means because this isn't the same place where I saw it last. Hearing individuals, you all pick up incidental learning things. You pick up on vocabulary, on how words are used just by, walking around every day. We don't have that same type of access that you do. So also we need to remember that signs are not a one-to-one correlation with an English word. So a sign may have different meanings, which is why we bring in an interpreter to clarify so that they're using the accurate meaning of the word. Okay, I'm going to close my slide presentation. Are there any questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.